India on the Eve of Crown Government by Babasaheb Ambedkar, Part 4. Speaking of the condition of the people in the dominions of the Marathas, who were contemporaries of the later Mughals, a traveller says, "From Surat I passed the Ghats, and when I entered the country of the Marathas, I thought myself in the midst of the simplicity and the happiness of the golden age, where nature was yet unchanged, and war and misery were unknown. The people were cheerful, vigorous, and in high health, and unbounded hospitality was universal virtue. Every door was open, and friends, neighbors, and strangers were alike welcome to whatever they found. With regard to the economic condition of the people in southern India, which was under the rule of Tipu, a historian says, when a person traveling through a strange country finds it well cultivated, populous with industrious inhabitants, cities newly founded, commerce extending, towns increasing, and everything flourishing, so as to indicate happiness, he will naturally conclude it to be under a form of government congenial to the minds of the people. This is a picture of Tipu's country, and this is our conclusion respecting its government. His country was found everywhere full of inhabitants and apparently cultivated to the utmost extent of which the soil was capable. His government, though strict and arbitrary, was the despotism of a strict and able sovereign who nourishes, not oppresses, the subjects who are to be the means of his future aggrandizement, and his cruelties were, in general, inflicted on those who he considered as his enemies. Clive described Bengal as a country of inexhaustible riches. Macaulay said, in spite of the Mussulman despot and of the Maratha freebooter, Bengal was known through the East as the Garden of Eden, as the rich kingdom. Its population multiplied exceedingly, distant provinces were nourished from the overflowing of its granaries, and the noble ladies of London and Paris were clothed in the delicate produce of its looms. But with the advent of the English, things began to change. Prosperity bade fair to India and perched itself on the Union Jack. The evil forces were set forth both on the side of the Parliament and the East India Company. The rule of the company was anything but wise, it was rigorous, it gave security but destroyed property. The scheme of administration was far from perfect. Adam Smith characterizes the company of merchants as incapable of considering themselves as sovereigns, even after they have become such, and says, trade or buying in order to sell again they will consider as their principal business, and by a strange absurdity regard the character of the sovereign as but an appendix to that of the merchants. As sovereigns, their interest is exactly the same with that of the country which they govern. As merchants, their interest is directly opposite to that interest. Adam Smith's criticism of the courts of proprietors and directors, described in the last chapter, is also very valuable. He posits that the interest of every proprietor of Indian stock is by no means the same with that of the country in the government of which his vote gives him some influence, and says this would be exactly true if those masters never had any other interest but that which belongs to them as proprietors of Indian stock. But they frequently have another of much greater importance. Frequently, a man of great, sometimes even a man of moderate fortune, is willing to give 13th or 14th £100 merely for the influence which he expects to acquire by a vote in the court of proprietors. It gives him a share, though not in the plunder, yet in the appointment of the plunderers of India. The directors, though they make those appointments, being necessarily under the influence of the court of proprietors, which not only elects them but sometimes overrules their appointments. A man of great or even of moderate fortune, provided he can enjoy this influence for a few years and thereby get a certain number of his friends appointed to employment in India, frequently cares little about the dividends which he can expect from so small a capital, or even about the improvement or loss of the capital itself upon which his vote is founded. About the prosperity or ruin of the great empire in the government of which that vote gives him a share, he seldom cares at all. No other sovereign ever were, or from the nature of things ever could be, so perfectly indifferent about the happiness or misery of their subjects, the improvement or waste of their dominions, the glory or disgrace of their administration, as, from irresistible moral causes, the greater part of the proprietors of such a mercantile company are necessarily must be. The end.